Minister, in the first instance, I'd like to refer to the two reports which were published last week into the issue around the penalty points and the allegations of erasing penalty points. And just to put on the record that we have no issue with those reports. We welcome the findings that there was no corruption, and indeed we also agree that An Garda Síochána should be allowed exercise a degree of discretion. And I think some people have sought to discredit the reports, saying that you can't have the Gardaí investigating the Gardaí. And it is open to you, Minister, and indeed the Justice Committee, or indeed the Garda Síochána Ombudsman Commission themselves, to inquire into the matter also. So there is an outside agency that can have a degree of oversight into that, should it so be warranted. But I want to put it on the record, our position in relation to it. But unfortunately, Minister, having reached that point, we then enter the situation of last Thursday night in prime time. And unfortunately, since then, you have sought to completely confuse the issue in relation to what you said and the privileged and private information that you used in prime time to smear another individual using private confidential information. You have continually sought to mix that up with the whole reporting of the two reports last week, and you're doing so in a skilled attempt to try and confuse people's minds. Now, Minister, I have said you should resign, and I stand over that, and that is the position of our party. You have clearly crossed the line. You knowingly and willingly abused your position to smear another individual with private, privileged information that came into your possession, and you did so on the national television to a political opponent. And I would ask you, as Minister for Justice, where do you stand in relation to due process? Where do you stand in relation to natural justice? Where do you stand in relation to a person's privacy and any rights that they may have with that? And where does the Fine Gael party, where do the Labour Party, where does the government stand in relation to that? Because you clearly made a predetermined decision to go into that television programme and to use that private and privileged information in the manner and the fashion in which you did. And you set yourself up as judge, jury and executioner of a political opponent, and that just isn't on. And then when you follow on from last Thursday, you made a statement yesterday, and that raised further questions. You referred to it as a general briefing, and you referred to the information around Deputy Wallace as being merely incidental. And you then also said that you did nothing unlawful. But that's not for you to determine. You see, you're happy to be judge, jury and executioner of another individual on RTE primetime, and then at the same time you want to act as judge and jury in your own regard. But unfortunately for you, that will be a determination which SIPO will make, and that will also be a determination which the Data Commissioner will make. So, you know, you can't be acting like they act in some of the banana republics around the world. As a modern society, we have to have a degree of responsibility and own up to those responsibilities. Now, we have to look at your track record, Minister, in relation to similar circumstances in this regard. And you will recall when you stood on this side of the House, and we are judging you by your own standards and by the utterances that you engaged in when similar situations arose over the years. And in 2002, the then Junior Minister for Justice, Bobby Malloy, had an issue. And you quite clearly said the Minister should recognise that his position as a government minister is no longer tenable and should resign. Such a monumental error of judgment might have been forgivable had it been made by a political novice serving a first term in the Dáil. Now apply that standard to yourself, Minister. And then, back in 2010, in relation to Deputy Willie O'Dea, you specifically stated, and quite incorrectly I might add also, that he willing and publicly discussed for his own electoral gain confidential information furnished to him by a member of An Garda Síochána. Such conduct is unacceptable by any minister in any government. Again, Minister, I would ask you and your colleagues to judge you by your own standards. And by your own standards, you're not being consistent and you're engaging in blatant hypocrisy. Now, in relation to An Garda Síochána, and you have quoted in your statement there your role and your responsibility as head of An Garda Síochána, and you're supposed to be the ultimate leader. But they don't see leadership in you. There is an unhealthy tension. We've discussed it here on many occasions. And unfortunately, you haven't made any strident efforts to try and foster and rebuild a decent working relationship with An Garda Síochána. And I think that you have further compounded that unhealthy situation that pertains and exists between you and An Garda Síochána, because you've quoted the An Garda Síochána Act in relation to the roles and responsibilities of briefing you as Minister. And that section of the Act permits the Gardaí to brief the Minister on 3 issues: on the preservation of peace and public order, on the protection of life and property, and indeed on state security. So where then does the briefing in relation to a member of this House, or indeed a member of a private citizen out there that you are to be facing in a debate on the television programme, come into play? So you are dropping the person who gave you that briefing into the mix here, whether knowingly or willingly or indeed inadvertently. And you know, there are serious penalties for members of An Garda Síochána who breach that section of the Act, up to a €50,000 fine or indeed 6 months in prison. Now, I said it yesterday and I'll say it again here today. The Taoiseach's response has been particularly weak. His response when he was out foreign in Boston, and indeed again here today. He expressed 100% confidence in you. Now, what sort of a message, and I'd ask everybody here, what sort of a message does that send out to everybody in this country, right to our communities, when the Taoiseach can express confidence in you, you having blatantly used private and privileged information to discredit and to smear somebody? What does the Taoiseach stand for now, when he doesn't stand for people's rights, for due process and for natural justice? And he was asked here today on Leaders' Questions, quite a simple question by Micheál Martin. Do you accept it was wrong? He was asked that, yes or no, do you accept he was wrong? And he couldn't give an answer. He was unable to say so. So, you know, not alone does the government have to do and act appropriately, but it has to be seen to act appropriately. And in this manner and fashion, I think you're failing really, really bad. You only have to look at President Obama, a real leader. What did he do? He sacked the head of the Inland Revenue Service. So, Alaska Corla, I have a number of questions which I'd like the Minister to address. First of all, Minister, how did you come into the possession of the information which you revealed on the RTE primetime programme last Thursday night? Who briefed you? You said, I think it was the Garda Commissioner in passing in your statement. Have you received similar information on other people? Is it now in your possession? Have you previously used this type of information against other people or indeed other political opponents that we're not aware of? In relation to the briefing, Minister, can you tell us what form did the briefing take? Was it an oral briefing? Was it a written briefing? Who else was present at the briefing? Was it discussed at government? Did you discuss it with your cabinet colleagues? Or indeed, what other third parties have you discussed this briefing with? How did an unrecorded incident pertaining to Deputy Wallace make its way to you when it wasn't recorded on Pulse? You might address that also. Did you ask for the names of any other political figures or any other public figures? And can you tell us, Minister, finally, do you have any regard for the data protection guidelines, and do you adhere to the data protection guidelines in your role as Minister and indeed within your department? Thank you.